Hi everybody, it's David Ault, and I was reflecting on the fact that it's almost been a year since I disrupted the routine of having to create a weekly talk. That had been a part of my life for almost 20 years, and I realized that I missed that. And I thought, well, what about that do you miss? I missed the research. I missed the ability to create this silence around myself so that I could focus and come up with something that I felt was meaningful and purposeful and inspirational. And then I kind of laughed because I realized that I don't need anything formal out there in order to continue that practice. And what I have is social media, and what I have is the opportunity to speak to you and to create a pure intent that maybe something that is upon my heart might be the very thing that's upon your heart, and together we could collaborate and create solution. So here I am, it's November 2019, and one of my aims is to do this with some regularity, maybe once a week. And anything that is really speaking to me, I just want to be able to share it via social media. So one of the things that I was pondering was the fact that even though we think we know ourselves, that perhaps we are the greatest stranger. That even though we live with ourselves 24/7, the actual potential, the unlimited potential of who and what we are is still very unknown. And how would we ever get more familiar with that? Well, how do you become familiar with anything that is a stranger? You have to spend time. There has to be some commitment. There has to be an established relationship. And it made me think about these series of books that were written in the early 1920s by a man named Baird Spaulding. They were called The Life of the Masters of the Far East. And they were these multiple volumes of these adventures of these men who were in the Himalayas and in India and Nepal, and their supposed encounters with all of these wise supernatural teachers. But there was always a paragraph in volume 1 that struck me, and it's talked about this idea of us actually being a stranger to ourselves. So I pulled it off my bookshelf and I looked it up, and it said, and pardon me because I'm going to make it gender neutral as I read it, if we could come to know the greater stranger, ourselves, to let them know and enter into our closet and to shut the door, that there we would find our most dangerous enemy, that there we would learn to master them. We would find our true self. There we would find our truest friend, our wisest teacher, our safest advisor, ourselves. There we would find the altar upon which this idea of God is the undying fire, the source of all goodness, all strength, all power, ourselves. We would know that this thing called God is in the deepest part of our own silence. We would find that within us abides the Holy of Holies. We would feel and know that this every desire is in God's mind and is therefore in God's desire. And then we would feel and know that that closest relationship of God and us, the Father and Son, the source, the macrocosm and the microcosm, we would realize that only in consciousness has there ever been any separation of that. Just as in spirit and in body we would have seemed to be two, we would now come to the realization that there's only ever been one. So when I think about that paragraph, what it says to me is that we are perpetually in a state of illusion. The illusion meaning that this thing that is powerful, that this thing that is all wise, that this seeming answer outside of us is that outside of us. And the grand illusion is, no, it never has been. And here we are walking around and being in being in a relationship with us perhaps physically, but being a stranger to who we are spiritually. Because who we are spiritually, again, is the same as this thing that we call God. It is the same as this thing which is all power and intelligence, because we are the microcosm of that which is the macrocosm. I'm always fascinated by, in research, of the question of what was the first recorded spiritual idea? What was the first thing that was documented in esoteric knowledge? And many historians will say that it is as above, so below. As within, so without. Again, what does that mean? As above, so below. As above, that which we attribute to the heavens, to God, to the all-powerful. That which is in the macrocosm is the same as in the microcosm. But we exhibit it only in the degree of our own consciousness and our own awareness. As within means that the belief within us matches that which is out. As within, so without. So whatever is going on inside becomes a mirror to the very thing that we experience in the external world. It's supposed to be the first documented esoteric spiritual idea, trying to teach us that there actually is no separation, that this idea of separation between God and us, or whatever word you like, intelligence in us or source in us, has all been this fallacy. And we become strangers to our own potency, to our own abilities to create. And so how do we remedy that? Well, in the book, The Life of the Masters of the Far East, he's saying to kind of literally go into our own closet. What does that mean? Go into a place of silence. Get to know yourself. Get to know the macrocosm of you. Get to know the expanded thought of you. And I know that it sounds easy and fun and like, yeah, let's do that. But we don't. Isn't it crazy? We get so seduced by the apparent issues or troubles or density of all of that makes up the human experience, that we forget. We become a stranger to our own power. I remember years ago when I lived in Los Angeles, I think it was a one-act play or something. I went to go see it. And I don't really remember the play itself, but I do remember the title of the play. And it was Low Level Panic. Don't ask me why that stuck with me, but I thought it was such a great description of how most of us navigate through the world. We navigate through this energy of low-level panic, meaning that we're controlling the panic. We're getting up in the morning, we're getting dressed, we're going to work, we're taking care of our families, we're trying to pay our bills as best we can, but there's a panic attached to it that somehow creates this narrative that there's not going to be enough, that the rug's going to be pulled out from under us, that we're going to be left in situations and that are going to render us helpless. And so we're churning and moving and trying to be productive in order to keep that panic under control. So it's kind of a low-level panic. It's an unseen panic. And yet at the same time, it's the chief operating system by which we show up in the world. And if you and I think that we're fooling other people by managing that or hiding that or seemingly taming it and without anyone else knowing, I can tell you that the jig is up, because people can read our energy. I can read the energy, and I can see how that low-level panic influences the way in which we engage in the world. It's the thing that feeds the ability of us to not get to know ourselves. And so we remain strangers to our own power through this low-level panic. And what can we do about that? So it's not enough to talk about it. It's not enough to intellectually dissect it. We do, like Baird Spaulding wrote in this book, we have to enter into the closet of our own intentionality, our own spiritual practice, and shut out the outside world and get still so that we can remember who we are. And I'm a man who loves practical application, because without practical application, I believe that there's no embodiment. And without embodiment, then we're wasting time. We're wasting energy. We are just perusing and flipping the pages of information, but we're not doing anything to bring it home. We're not getting acquainted with the beauty and the power of who we are. And so if we find ourselves then in a low-level panic situation, what can you and I do? It's as simple as this. Stop. And this will sound counterintuitive, but celebrate the fact that you're aware of the panic. In other words, there's nothing that you and I can do differently until we're aware of the pattern. So when we're aware of the suffocation of the panic, when we're aware of the fear, celebrate that and go, oh, look at me. I'm aware of this fear. And then in that moment of awareness, stop the rhythm or the flow of that fear or panic and pick a moment in life where you experienced solution. Pick a moment in life that even perhaps was euphoric for you, where you experienced a win, where something was resolved and you could feel this just sense of ease, like your whole body could just breathe again. Pick a moment, just one moment, where something like that happened, and then pull it to the forefront. Pull it to the forefront as if in your imagination you are there recreating that moment. The beautiful thing about our imagination is that it's not bound by time. And so even though we label it as the past, when we bring it to the forefront, energetically, it's like it's happening again cellularly within our body. So all of a sudden, we are now, instead of focused on the panic, we're focused on and in celebration of this solution, this resolve, this euphoria. And then just be with that as long as you can. Try to sustain it for a couple of minutes. Because what that does then is it shifts us. It shifts us out of the standard routine of trying to overcome. And it puts us in a place of accepting and receiving joy, or accepting and receiving solution. Because when we're in panic, we are separate from the solution. But when we stop the rhythm of the panic and we focus on when something worked out, then we are back in alignment with solution, and therefore what? Solution can present itself. A door can open. A divine idea can finally be heard and attuned to, and we're no longer a stranger to that. So very quickly, yesterday I was back at the hospital. I've been in a year-long process of navigating the waters of fixing my physical human heart. Maybe fixing isn't the right word, but revealing a more potent, vibrant heart so that I can live out the rest of my life in an optimum state. And so I was having a checkup after one of my last surgeries, and they had to put me out again. And so they had to put a ventilator down my throat and a scope down there to see if this thing called a Watchman that they had installed above the top part of my heart was in place correctly. It had been a couple of months. And so I said to them, well, I'm in atrial fib. right now. I'm out of rhythm. While I'm under, can you just zap me again and help me get back into regular rhythm? And they said, no, I'm sorry, that's not on the order. We would have to have had advance notice and doctor approval and everything. And for some reason, I was compelled to not let it go. And I was like, and I joked. I said, oh, but I have a Groupon, 2 for 1. And they all laughed and they were saying, sorry, that's not protocol. And then another technician would come in and another technician would come in. And I was relentless in my asking. And then finally, the main doctor who was going to do this procedure to put the scope down came in, and I presented the idea to him. And he was like, well, I don't think we can do that. Again, getting the same story. And then miraculously, they all stepped out of the room for a moment. And I just closed my eyes. It's as if I went into the closet of my own mind. And I said, what do you want, David? What do you want? I said, I want them to zap me back into regular rhythm because I know how much better I would feel. And I'm already going to be under anesthesia. Why not do this? And so I closed my eyes and I envisioned them telling me that yes, they were going to do it. I envisioned them going, we got it worked out. I envisioned me going, yes. And it only took maybe a minute, and then they all walked back in. And guess what? That main doctor said, I made a call, we're gonna do it, so your Groupon is good. And they all laughed again. And it just, yes, it was wonderful, and yes, they zapped me, and yes, I feel tremendously better today. But it also reminded me of how often we miss that opportunity. The opportunity to just go within the closet of our own mind and to shut everything out and to see in our imagination what we want, rather than trying to keep at bay everything that we don't want. You see the distinction in that, right? Because that's really what happens. That's how we get seduced, is all of our energy is on, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. And because that's it, that's what's prevalent. And if we could just stop. Today, wherever you are when you're watching this, I want to invite you to stop. Just stop. And go into this secluded place in your mind where you can be reacquainted and no longer be a stranger with the inherent power that is within you. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And never forget that your solution already exists. That's my mantra. That's my catchphrase. That's everything that is the foundation of my teaching, is that solution already exists. What prevents us from experiencing that is our forgetfulness. So it's time for all of us, myself included, to wake up, to enjoy the opportunity and the adventure that lies before us, and to never forget that we have options, and to know above and beyond that who and what we are matters, that we're powerful, and that we have great opportunity to exercise and use that. May you be well. May the words from my heart find a way to speak to you, to give you an answer, and may you know joy in your life. God bless.